Kia ora Aotearoa, I'm Zoe George and this is a bonus episode of The Podium. Sports news, but not as you know it from Stuff. We had an amazing chat with Rugby World Cup referee Maggie Cogger-Orr. She hails from near Toronto in Canada, but moved here in 2014. She's been rugby mad since her early teenage years, which was where we started our conversation, before covering off her funniest moments on the field, who's more difficult to ref, and how reffing could be the perfect way to get more women involved in rugby from the grassroots up. Kia ora, Maggie. Welcome to The Podium.
Thanks for having me.
It's so wonderful to have you on. So I have to start by asking, why rugby?
I think it's one of those things in your life you reflect and you're like, wow, it was really sort of one small decision that just like totally changed the trajectory of where I ended up. And honestly, it was like I just happened to go to a rugby high school really in Canada where no one really knows a lot about rugby. And I went to a very small high school, 450 people. But it just happened that the lady who coached the girls team at my high school was, a former national team player, Jen Boyd. And she turned up one day when I was playing boys football and was like, well, any girl who's, keen to play boys football will be great on the rugby field. Like, you're coming to play for me in the spring. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't even know what this is, 13 years old. And yeah, I mean, honestly, like one decision when you're 13, and here I am quite a few years later.
Here you are. So you started off as a player. When did that transition into refereeing happen?
So I did a little bit of refereeing during university, just to make beer money, to be totally honest. You could rock up on a Wednesday and ref a under 15 and under 18 game back to back and walk away with $100 cash. And I thought, oh, this is a pretty good gig. I could get among this. And then took it a little bit more seriously sort of when I was like 20, 21, because I had 2 knee surgeries. So I had 2 ACL reconstructions. So yeah, like in between the reconstructions, I did a club season where I wasn't allowed to play, but I was allowed to run. So I thought, oh, I'll just ref and, keep busy on my Saturdays. And, had a few people say, hey, you're pretty good at this, you should give this a go, but 20, not quite ready to give up the ghost of being a player myself. So I sort of said, I think I'll just play till I'm 25 and then have a bit of a reassess, a reevaluate about where I'm at. And if I'm not, on the senior national team at 25, then I'll give reffing a go. Obviously, at that point, little did I know I'd end up in New Zealand. But yeah, got to New Zealand, played some club rugby up here, with college rifles in Auckland, won the Coleman Shield, which is our big premier competition, and turned 25. And I thought, okay, well, I said I'd try. So just rocked up to a referee meeting, basically, and was like, oh, I'm here. Here we go.
And was that pathway supportive of you? Because we see a lot of men's rugby. We don't see a lot of women's referees, but we're seeing more now. And I think the World Cup, there's 18 match officials and all the referees are women, nine women. I was like, yes. So what's that pathway been like? Has it been supportive? Has it been difficult?
I think, to be honest, it's been very supportive. I think all of New Zealand rugby recognise that it's an area that, we are lacking in across not just women representation, but certainly like our Pacifica and Māori representation of our referees. Like, we're certainly lacking in diversity in that space. And again, I don't think that's intentional. I think it's just sort of the way it's always been. And really, again, the goal, I think, of the rugby community is that our match officials are representative of the people that they're refereeing, and our players in terms of strongest groups of players, quickest growing. We're looking at Māori, Pacifica, women. These are our biggest, most supportive stakeholders of the game. And so we certainly want to see them represented in our match officials because it is a separate pathway. It does require some different skills, but it is something that, we want people to think, oh, actually, I could do that. And that I think that also would help match officials be more included in the rugby community because when they look like you and they've come from where you've come from, it's easier to connect with them. Whereas sometimes right now, I think it's a little bit of an us and them environment with match officials and players. They sort of, we can sometimes feel like that. But
what's the best thing about being a referee?
Well, this is really corny, and I'm the first to admit it is corny because it sounds like a tagline from an infomercial, but it genuinely gives you the best seat in the house. Like, you could not ask for a better seat. You are meters if you get it wrong, inches, centimeters away from these collisions, from these passes, from these just incredible, obviously, at all different levels, these incredible athletes. And to get to see things from that perspective and from that distance is just phenomenal. Like to get to be on field and watch someone like Ruby Tui score these tries. And, it's just something that money couldn't buy that, Like there's no seat in Eden Park that's going to offer you a better seat than being in the middle with the whistle. And the other thing for me personally, I think, is when you get to be the ref, you go across a bunch of grades, Like I've had the opportunity to ref, women's Farrah Palmer Cup, but I've also had the opportunity to ref Heartland, in like rural, Wairarapa Bush, like I've had first 15, so you get access to a lot more as a referee because you're not limited by what grade you belong in as a player. You get access to a lot more stuff. So I think it's just the experiences are incredibly diverse and incredibly exciting.
What's the worst thing about being a referee?
Well, I mean, there's a few. I mean, obviously, again, like it is something that, particularly at a community level, like it can be quite lonely. Like if you're out on a Saturday reffing club rugby in Auckland, until you get to that premier level where you have 2 assistant referees, you are generally by yourself, which is tough. I mean, it's tough to be in the middle and every now and then have any decision you make, you're going to upset half the people on the field. So, there's some downsides in the sense of like, no one wants to be disliked. No one wants people to think like, oh, I've just ruined this person's day, which can be tough. But I think, and honestly, like I come from a school teaching background, and that's my big thing is like, it's such a great life skill though to have to put up with some of that stuff and have to be put in those positions where you are making some tough decisions and you're having to sort of stand up for yourself. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a downside, some of the sort of negative interactions that you might have. But yeah, the silver lining is like the life skills and the opportunity to have personal growth are pretty immense that come from that.
We'll get to the school teaching shortly, but what's harder to ref, men's or women's rugby?
They're very different. So I've had this question before. And actually, so purely, obviously, from like a biology, physics point of view, like men's rugby has bigger collisions because you got bigger human beings moving at a slightly faster speed. So in terms of the collisions that are happening, everything is happening a little bit quicker. In terms of so in refereeing, we call it management, which is sort of about your interactions with other people. I genuinely think women's rugby is harder to referee because I'm going to be honest with you, most men, I think deep down, are used to being told what to do by a woman. Most women don't like being told what to do by anybody. So there is genuinely, I think, I often find men quite easy to manage. You get over the first 10 minutes and then they go, okay, it's just not worth it. Like, she's the boss, I've moved on. Women, there's never a point, I think, where they're just sort of abiding you for a few minutes, but they've never really gotten to the point where they think you're the boss.
I'm crying right now because it's so true.
100%.
Okay, then how's this? Who's easier to handle, rugby players or teenagers, since you're a high school teacher?
So again, I think so. I teach an all-girls school, so I'm probably like generally the players. The players are a lot more used to being told what to do, I think. But there's a lot of crossover, to be totally honest. Anytime I've got a game on TV, and you have to have a bit of the chat with someone of being like, that's enough. The people that work at a school will go, oh yeah, that's a teacher voice. You can hear the teacher voice coming out there and being like, and we found the line. No more coming from you. So I think there's a big crossover in skills. But yeah, honestly, teenagers, anyone who has a teenager or is around teenagers know that they're probably the most challenging group to work with, to be honest.
What's the funniest thing that's happened to you on field?
Oh, I mean, funny for me or funny for other people? I mean, certainly like earlier in the year, I absolutely got cleaned up by a player and my feet left the ground. I was genuinely airborne, which I actually don't know how I didn't hurt myself. But luckily, didn't hurt myself, blew my whistle, dusted myself off we went. And it just so happened that a friend of mine was filming, so that had like a little mini round on the old social media, which was not funny for me personally, but funny for those around me. You always get some good quips from the players, to be fair. I've had a prop offer to buy me like $40 of Burger King if I called a preseason game early because he was so knackered. He was so tired. He's like, I will literally take you to Burger King if you call this game. I was like, you got 25 minutes to go, mate. Like, it's a long time. I can't call the game early. So, yeah, front rows probably normally give you the best banter, even though maybe the halfbacks are the ones that talk the most. The tighties up front are probably the ones who actually have the best chat.
Good to know. And I must admit, I have actually really appreciated the talk with the referees and the players during this Rugby World Cup, and just the way that it's said. Like, I was watching the game against Scotland and Wales the other day, which was like super scrappy, and they were getting in a bit of a fight on the sideline, and the ref just calmly called them over and was just calm down, and it was fascinating because Scotland went hell no and then just got stuck in. It was just, but I found it incredibly approachable. It was like, there's no BS type situation. We're not going to take any crap, but we're going to do it in a way that is not going to cut anyone down. And I just thought that was it was really nice. It was really lovely, I thought. What's your ethos when it comes to refereeing? Like, do you ever you said you pulled out the teacher voice. Like, how often does that come out?
Oh, it's pretty rare, I think. It's probably been a shift, I would say, in the refereeing space. If you look at sort of old videos of refereeing, it was very much like, I'm the boss, you're the player. You know, like, there's a clear hierarchy of how we're sitting here. And I think, obviously, you know, human nature, like, no one wants to feel like someone is talking down to them, someone's patronizing them. So 99% of the time, it's like, we're actually not going to get the best set of people. Like, at the end of the day, as a referee, it's like, I want to work with someone to make sure that we're getting the best out of it. It's like, I don't really want to boss you around if I don't have to. So, yeah, I think it's a balancing act to make sure it's like, listen, I will treat you with respect, but if you don't treat me with respect, at some point, you know, a line is going to have to be drawn here. And I think that's probably when the teacher voice comes out, when you're like, you're now starting to blatantly disregard what I've told you to do, or you're doing something potentially that you know is illegal. You know, you always get those ones where you're like, I know exactly what you just did. Don't do that. You know, it's a bit of a, thought I could get away with it, didn't get away with it. Okay, now we move on. But, you know, I think that's the thing, is we get better out of people when they think, she doesn't think less of me. She's not trying to be the boss of me. She's just here because she's got to do a job and I've got to do a job. And that's, I think, most referees too. It's like, we all appreciate that a captain's job is to challenge, is to try to milk every ounce of advantage they can get out of a game. And if that is coming and asking questions and that is sort of challenging you as a referee, like, that's totally in their scope. Again, as long as it's done in a way that, you know, is respectful and, you know, we're not getting into name calling and things that, you know, are not actually going to help anyone. But it is funny because Clara, our Italian referee, she just dropped me off to come here. She is probably, honestly, like, she's an ice cube. Like, we were even live. We were like, wow, just no, not even a bat of an eye. Like, just, she is super cool, calm, and collected. So even all of us were like, whoa, she's done well here to just be an absolute even Stevens as these girls are just losing their minds at each other. But it's good. We need that. Sometimes you need the calming influence. When temperatures get high, we talk about we need to be sort of calm, cool, and collected, and give everybody space to get their heads back on.
Yeah, and I mean, I must admit, I watched all the games on the weekend. Watching the players is one thing, but I do like to watch the refs, and you're running back and forth, and you're in there, and it's like, how many kilometres a game are you running? My goodness, it looks exhausting.
Yeah, so honestly, I think the most I've ever done, men's or women's, was I had when the Black Ferns played Japan the other week, and it was like the Porsche Woodman show, and I did almost 9 kilometres, which is, I mean, and I swear to God, about 5 of them were chasing Porsche and Ruby on the edges, to be totally honest with you. On an average game, you'd probably do 5 or 6. Again, some of that's sideways running, some of it's lateral, some of it's, you know, so you're sort of walking and moving. But yeah, it's one of those things, you'd be surprised how many Ks you cover until you sort of actually wear a GPS unit around it. And yeah, certainly if you get a big high scoring game, you get your steps in. Absolutely get your steps in.
Wow. How do you train for that? Do you just go on big runs?
It's a lot of not long running because, again, we sort of look at rugby and it's like, well, as a referee, very rarely do I just constantly run. So we do a lot of sort of mixed interval training, you know, run for a minute, 30 seconds off, run for 2 minutes, 30 seconds off, you know, so sort of mixed interval training. Obviously, compared to players, there's no contact training. Like, if I'm doing my job, I don't get hit. So there's not too much risk about any of that. So a lot of sort of, like agility under fatigue, making sure we've got the sort of speed capacity to sort of continuously accelerate. A few long runs, you can't sort of get away from a little bit of aerobic base, but, you know, we try to make sure that we had training today and, like, we'll play touch to warm up and then we'll do some training and then we'll play touch to finish. Or we brought a cricket set today that was a big hit. We were teaching the non-cricket countries about cricket, so that went down a treat. Everyone had a good time today.
For those heading to Auckland for the Rugby World Cup, where should we go get some lunch?
Ooh, oh man, that's tough. I'm a brunch girl myself. Like, I love a brunch. So depending on where you are, certainly, again, we're here in Ponsonby. I've just dropped off some of the international referees to have a wander and get some lunch down here. So personally, a little off the beaten track, but down Herne Bay end of Ponsonby, 5 Loaves Eatery. They do a very good chicken Caesar wrap. Would highly recommend. Anywhere in it's tough to find a bad bite to eat in Ponsonby. Ponsonby Central, great place to start. About 6 or 7 restaurants right in there. Only about 10 minutes to go to Eden Park, down a hill and up. Great place to get some food before or have come for a dinner after.
Amazing. Yes, well, I will be up there in the next few weeks for the semi-finals and the finals. Where will you be at the final? Will you be, well, I guess if it's New Zealand, you can't ref, can you?
Exactly. So we always want, obviously the other Kiwi referee here, who's Lauren Jenner, this is a constant dilemma for her because she refs on the Sevens circuit, and 99 times out of 100 the Black Ferns are in the Sevens finals. But much like her, I would always rather New Zealand be in a final than me be in the final, 100%. So ideally, I'd like to be maybe in a third or a fourth game. That would be a great spot for me to be, running touch, being involved, getting to be at Eden Park to see the girls. Again, I'm just stoked to be here. I know that sounds very trying to play it down, but genuinely, it's just such a cool opportunity to be here, and to be involved in the opening day in Eden Park was just phenomenal. To watch it all and listen to it all and get to sit in the stands and watch the poi, and just absolutely something I will never forget. So it's all sort of gravy from here, I think. After that, it's all bonus to be involved in anything. And yeah, I'm really hoping to not get to be involved in the final because I want to not be allowed to be. That would be the ideal outcome for me.
Let's face it, even though women have been playing rugby almost as long as men in New Zealand, there's still this kind of thing, this notion that rugby's a man's sport for men, and it's still dominated by men, and women's experiences and voices have been sidelined, and so at times it hasn't been welcoming to women. So how do we get women and girls into rugby and into refereeing in particular? Yeah,
I think it's very true. It still can feel like quite a male-dominated space at times. And I think, for me personally, refereeing presents a great opportunity for women in the sense of it removes maybe some of the anxiety around the contact portion of being involved in rugby, about I'm going to get hurt. Or something's going to happen, because it removes that element, obviously. And I think the biggest thing for me, and this is totally anecdotal, I don't actually know this for a fact, I just think this, I think it really for me often comes down to the fact that a lot of women, it's there's 10 things you need to be able to do and I only meet 5 of them, so I'm not going to try. Men are like, I've met 2 of them, happy days, I'll put an application in for that. Not stereotype, not all men are like that, but and I think a lot of women, that holds them back from refereeing. A lot of women I talk to are like, I couldn't do it. Not a I don't want to. It's I couldn't do it, which is frustrating because it's you could 100%. Most Kiwis, it's you've been watching rugby since you could open your eyes and sit in front of a TV. I'm confident you could referee a game of rugby. And the big thing is no one rocks up and automatically knows how to do it. It's not like we expect you to turn up and already know how. So I think that's the big thing is getting your foot in the door and actually overcoming the first hurdle of it's going to be fine. I'm not going to embarrass myself. And again, for a lot of our younger girls, I think that holds them back. The fear of what your peers are going to think, or again, because at any given point, 15 people in the field are not going to be that happy with you. Which can be really hard for some of our younger people to have that sort of negative feedback. But I think it's such a great opportunity for young women in particular to develop that resilience piece. That's a word thrown around a lot in education right now, but it's a great chance to be actually, no, this is what it is. We're going to go with it. And it's every week you're getting to build that experience, and you're getting to make some friends, and you're getting to travel around even locally. And then at that sort of flip side of things, I think personally, I don't have kids, but for me, it's a great opportunity if you were a mom and you wanted to be involved, to find a way to be involved in rugby without having to commit to about 17 other things. Because it's there's no Tuesday training. There's no Thursday training. If you can go for a run with the pram, happy days. If you can't this week, it's not a big deal. You can say, hey, on Saturday, I can only ref at 9 a.m. Sweet. Turn up, ref the game, done at 10, home by 10:30. So I think there's a great opportunity there for some of our mums to stay involved in rugby in a way that doesn't suck up a lot of time that they don't have. That's a big thing for me. Is I think it would be an awesome way to ref your kids' team, or to ref something that you're already going to the ground. You're already going to be there, and just sort of putting yourself forward to be involved. And then sort of from a third point, we've got how do we get more of our Black Ferns? How do we get more of our NPC players to come over? Because that's obviously become a very common pathway in the men's game. You've got your Glenn Jacksons, your Dan Wyangas. We've got some very talented referees who have come sort of directly from a playing pathway. And New Zealand Rugby has just sort of started a scholarship program to try to attract women who are still playing at that level. And that's the big thing is how can we get them to think, okay, maybe I'm coming to the end of my playing career, Instead of them all being like, well, I'm going to be a coach, I'm going to be an S&C, how can we steal a few of them to come back and be like, well, you've got a lot to give here. You're still, a phenomenal athlete. You've got a great understanding of the game. Like, how can we get them to come to be a referee? And that's something that I don't have the answer to, but New Zealand Rugby certainly recognize that that's something that we want. And again, I think most people, once we get them in, they're like, oh, this is a lot of fun. I actually really like this. Like, it's challenging. It's hard. But once we sort of get people over that first hurdle, a lot of them are like, oh, I wish I'd done this sooner. So yeah, and that's something that I think we've got a big responsibility as a current group of referees to do, is to try to make sure that the next group coming through, maybe it is a little bit less male-centric, maybe it is a little bit easier, but that we actually sort of nudge them along far enough that we get them going.
And that's it for this bonus episode of The Podium. I'm Zoe George, and on behalf of Maggie Cogger-Orr, producers Jono Williams and Philippa Tolley, and audio engineer Connor Scott, thanks for listening. You can get in touch with us now. Email thepodium@stuff.co.nz. We'll see you back here for our regular episode on Monday.